The envelope arrived on a Tuesday, 3 weeks after they buried her father. Adanna Okafor sat in her small Lagos apartment, staring at the Seoul postmark with trembling fingers. Inside, a single photograph of her father shaking hands with an older Korean man, and beneath it, a number that made her stomach drop. $2 million. The letter was brief, clinical, terrifying. Her father had borrowed from the wrong people, and now the Kwon family was calling in their investment. She had 72 hours to arrive in Seoul, or they would come to Lagos for her mother and younger sister instead. Adanna had never left Nigeria. She'd spent her 26 years building a modest life as a procurement officer, dreaming of starting her own import business someday. Her father had always been secretive about his consulting work, those mysterious trips abroad that paid for her university education. Now she understood the price of her degree, and it was written in a contract she never signed. The flight to Incheon International Airport felt like a descent into another world. Everything gleamed with cold efficiency. At arrivals, a man in a black suit held a sign with her name. He didn't smile, didn't speak beyond a curt nod, and led her to a Mercedes that smelled of leather and expensive cologne. Seoul rushed past the tinted windows in a blur of neon and steel, nothing like the chaotic warmth of Lagos. She pressed her palm against the glass, watching her reflection fragment against the city lights, wondering if this was the last time she'd see herself as a free woman. The Kwon estate sat in Gangnam, behind walls that seemed designed to keep secrets in rather than keep people out. The house was a masterpiece of modern architecture, all clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows that revealed nothing of the darkness inside. Her escort led her through marble hallways to a study where 2 men stood waiting, identical in every way except for the way they looked at her. Both had the sharp, sculpted features that seemed carved from ice, dark eyes that assessed her like an asset on a balance sheet. They wore matching black suits, but one had loosened his tie slightly, a small rebellion that somehow made him more dangerous. The other stood perfectly composed, hands clasped behind his back, every inch the corporate heir. The one with the loose tie stepped forward first. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Miss Okafor, I'm Kwon Jae-sung. This is my brother, Jae-won. Welcome to your new life." Jae-won's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his gaze. Calculation. Assessment. Perhaps the faintest hint of curiosity. "Your father's debt transfers to you, as outlined in the contract he signed. $2 million or 3 years of service to our family. The choice was yours to make." "I had no choice," Adanna said, forcing her voice steady despite the fear coiling in her chest. "You threatened my family." "We protected them," Jae-sung corrected, circling her slowly. "Your father made enemies, Miss Okafor. Dangerous ones. The Kwon name offers shelter, but shelter isn't free." Jae-won pulled out a folder, placing it on the desk between them. "There's a third option we're prepared to offer. Marriage into the family settles the debt immediately. Full protection for your mother and sister. A generous monthly allowance sent to Lagos. You'd want for nothing." The room tilted. "Marriage? To which one of you?" The brothers exchanged a look she couldn't decipher. Jae-sung's smile widened, predatory now. "That's the interesting part. You have 1 week to decide. Get to know us both. Understand what each of us offers. Then you choose. And if I refuse, then you work off the debt in other ways," Jae-won said quietly. His tone was matter-of-fact, but the implication hung heavy in the air. 3 years managing the cultural integration division of our imports. Long hours. Difficult work. Your family remains vulnerable to your father's enemies. Adanna's mind raced. This wasn't just about debt. This was about power, about something these brothers wanted badly enough to offer marriage to a stranger. She looked between them, seeing the tension coiled beneath their civilized facade, the way they stood like chess pieces waiting for her first move. 1 week, she said finally. Then I decide. Jae-sung's laugh was low, dangerous. 1 week to determine your future, Miss Okafor. Choose wisely. Only one of us can give you what you really need. The Kwon mansion had 2 wings, and Adanna quickly learned they represented 2 different worlds. Jae-won occupied the east wing, all minimalist elegance and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. His days were filled with board meetings and conference calls, managing the family's legitimate business empire, shipping, real estate, technology investments. He was the respectable face of the Kwon dynasty, the one who attended charity galas and smiled for the cameras. Jae-sung ruled the West Wing, where meetings happened behind soundproof doors and men with hard eyes came and went at odd hours. He controlled the Shadow Empire, the network of underground operations that actually funded the Kwon fortune. Protection services, information brokerage, strategic acquisitions that never made the news. Where Jae-won built empires with contracts, Jae-sung built them with fear and loyalty. On her second day, Jae-won invited her to breakfast on his private terrace. The morning sun made Seoul look almost soft, the Han River glittering in the distance. He poured her tea with steady hands, his movements precise and controlled. "I understand this situation is difficult for you," he said, meeting her eyes directly. "I want you to know that if you choose me, I'll honor that choice. You'll have freedom, respect, a real partnership. I need someone who understands multiple cultures, who can help me expand our legitimate operations into Africa. Your father spoke highly of your business acumen." Adanna wrapped her hands around the delicate teacup. "You knew my father well. Well enough to know he was in over his head. He wanted to give you opportunities he never had. Unfortunately, he partnered with people who don't forgive debts." Jae-won's expression softened slightly. "I'm offering you a way out that benefits us both. Marry me, and you'll help build something legitimate. Something you can be proud of." Sounded reasonable, if almost appealing. But Adanna couldn't shake the feeling that Jae-won's careful composure hid something deeper, something more complicated than a simple business arrangement. That evening, Jae-sung found her in the garden, standing beneath cherry blossom trees that had already shed their petals. He didn't approach with Jae-won's calculated courtesy. Instead, he stood close enough that she could smell his cologne, feel the heat radiating from his body. "My brother offered you his version of freedom," Jae-sung said. "Let me offer you the truth. The Kwon family survives because we understand power. Real power. Not board meetings and handshakes, but the kind of influence that makes governments hesitate and enemies disappear. You're trying to seduce me with threats." Adanna turned to face him, refusing to step back. His smile was genuine this time, surprised and intrigued. "I'm telling you what you'll really get if you choose him. A gilded cage. Respectability. Boredom. Choose me, and you'll learn how this world actually works. You'll have real power, not just the illusion of it. Why do you both want this so badly? There must be hundreds of women who'd marry into the Kwon family." Jae-sung's expression darkened. "Our fathers will contains a clause. Whichever son marries first inherits control of the entire empire. Both sides. My brother wants to dismantle everything I've built, make us vulnerable by going completely legitimate. I want to protect what our family really is." The truth hit her like cold water. She wasn't choosing a husband. She was choosing which brother would win a war for their family's soul. Her father's debt had made her the ultimate prize in a game she barely understood. "What if I choose neither?" "Then we both lose," Jae-sung said softly. "And you work off your debt while we tear each other apart. Is that really what you want?" That night, Adanna couldn't sleep. She stood at her bedroom window, watching the lights of Seoul pulse and shimmer. Somewhere in Lagos, her mother and sister slept peacefully, unaware of the impossible choice she faced. She thought of her father, wondering what he'd seen in these brothers that made him trust them with his daughter's future. Or if he'd simply been desperate, making deals with devils because he had no other option. 3 days remained. 3 days to understand which brother offered salvation and which offered destruction. Or if perhaps both were simply different versions of the same trap. The turning point came on the 4th day, when Adanna did what neither brother expected. She went looking for the truth herself. The Kwon family employed dozens of staff members, most of them Korean, but she'd noticed a few other foreigners navigating the mansion's complex social hierarchy. In the kitchen, she found Min-jun, a young man who'd worked for the family for 5 years. His English was excellent, and more importantly, he seemed willing to talk when she offered to help him prepare lunch. "The twins," she asked carefully while chopping vegetables. "Have they always been at odds?" Min-jun glanced toward the door, then lowered his voice. "They used to be inseparable. Best friends, even closer than normal brothers. Then their father announced the inheritance clause 3 years ago, and everything changed. He pitted them against each other deliberately. Why would a father do that? Old man Kwon believed competition made men strong. He wanted to see which son truly had the ruthlessness to lead. But I think he didn't expect them to hate each other for it." Min-jun's hands moved efficiently, his expression troubled. Jae-won felt betrayed. He'd always been the dutiful son, following every rule. Suddenly, all that loyalty meant nothing unless he married first. Jae-sung felt vindicated. Finally, his father acknowledged that the underground empire mattered more than appearances. Adanna absorbed this, piecing together the puzzle. "And I'm caught in the middle of their war." "You're the endgame," Min-jun confirmed. "Your father's connection to both the legitimate and underground worlds made you perfect. Whichever brother wins you wins everything." "But Miss Okafor." He met her eyes seriously. "They're both good men who've been forced into terrible positions. Choose carefully, because your choice will define not just your life, but theirs too." That afternoon, Adanna made a decision. She would stop letting the brothers control the narrative. If she was going to choose, it would be on her terms, with all the information laid bare. She called a meeting in the main study, demanding both brothers attend. They arrived separately, Jae-won punctual and composed, Jae-sung deliberately 5 minutes late with that infuriating smirk. She stood between them, feeling the weight of their attention like physical pressure. "I've been thinking about your father's will," she began, watching their expressions carefully. "And I realize something neither of you has said out loud. You don't actually hate each other. You hate what he did to you." Jae-won's mask cracked slightly. Jae-sung's smirk faded. "Your father created a contest with only one winner, knowing it would destroy your relationship. He made your brotherhood incompatible with your inheritance. That's cruel, and I won't be the weapon he uses against you from beyond the grave." "What are you suggesting?" Kwon asked quietly. Adanna took a breath, knowing she was gambling everything on this moment. "I'm suggesting we change the game. Korean law allows for business partnerships outside of inheritance terms. What if you two stopped fighting each other and started fighting the system he created? Integrate the legitimate and underground operations properly, with both of you as equal partners. Show that your father was wrong, that cooperation makes you stronger than competition." "That's impossible," Jae-sung said, but his tone lacked conviction. "The will is ironclad. The will says whoever marries first controls the empire. It doesn't say the other brother has to be destroyed. You could share power. Actually work together instead of tearing each other apart." She looked between them. "Unless you've both forgotten how to trust each other completely." The silence stretched unbearably. Then Jae-won did something unexpected. He laughed, genuine and slightly bitter. "She's right. God help us, she's completely right. We've been so focused on winning that we forgot we used to be on the same side." Jae-sung ran a hand through his hair, his carefully maintained cool shattering. "You think I want to inherit an empire alone? I wanted my brother beside me. I always did. But you looked at me like I was the enemy." "Because father made us enemies," Jae-won said. "But maybe we don't have to be anymore." Adanna watched the brothers look at each other, really look, for what seemed like the first time in years. Something shifted in the room, a tension releasing that she hadn't even fully recognized was there. "So here's my proposal," she continued, pressing her advantage. "I'll marry one of you. My choice made freely, based on who I actually connect with, not on who offers the better deal. But the condition is that you two work together to restructure the company. Make your father's will irrelevant by creating something better than what he imagined. And if we agree, Jae-sung asked, then you give me 2 more days to make my choice. Not as a prize to be won, but as a person deciding her own future. The brothers exchanged a long look, years of rivalry and hurt and buried affection passing between them in silence. Finally, Jae-won extended his hand to his brother. Jae-sung stared at it for a heartbeat, then grasped it firmly. 2 days, they said in unison. The next 48 hours felt different. The mansion's atmosphere lightened as the brothers began actually talking to each other, tentative at first, then with increasing ease. Adanna watched them discover each other again. Shared jokes, complementary skills, the natural rhythm of twins who'd been forced apart. But she still had to choose. Jae-won took her to his favorite place in Seoul, a quiet temple tucked away in the mountains north of the city. They walked through gardens designed for meditation, and he told her about his dreams for the company's future. International expansion done ethically. Technology that improved lives rather than exploited them. He spoke with quiet passion, painting a picture of a life built on principles. If you choose me, he said as they watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson, I promise you'll never be just an obligation. I see who you are, Adanna. Your strength, your intelligence, your refusal to be anyone's pawn. I want a partner who challenges me to be better. His sincerity touched something in her chest. This would be a good life, stable and purposeful. She could respect Jae-won, maybe even grow to love him over time. Jae-sung's approach was entirely different. He took her into the heart of Seoul's nightlife, not to clubs or bars, but to the places where real power moved in shadows. She met the people who made the city function. Information brokers, protection specialists, fixers who solved problems that couldn't be addressed through legal channels. He showed her a world that existed alongside the respectable one, necessary and dangerous and thrillingly alive. This is what I'm offering, he said as they stood on a rooftop overlooking the glittering city. Not just survival but mastery. You have instincts, Adanna. I saw it the moment you arrived, the way you assessed every situation. You could be extraordinary in this world. You could be powerful in your own right, not just as someone's wife. His words ignited something in her, a hunger she hadn't known existed. This would be a dangerous life, unpredictable and intense. But she'd feel truly alive, using abilities she'd never had the chance to develop. On the final evening, Adanna sat alone in her room, weighing her choice. Both brothers had kept their promises. They were working together, drawing up plans to integrate their operations legitimately. Her decision would determine who led that integration, but either way the Kwon Empire would survive intact. So the question became, who was she? Who did she want to become? She thought of Lagos, of her mother's warnings to always take the safe path, to protect herself first. She thought of her father, who'd taken risks that ultimately destroyed him, but who'd given her opportunities through those same risks. She thought of the woman who'd arrived in Seoul terrified and powerless, and the woman who'd stood between two rivals and demanded they remember their humanity. When she descended the stairs to the study where both brothers waited, she knew her answer. They stood as she entered, mirror images of tension and hope. She looked at both of them, these complicated men who'd been willing to change for her, to challenge their father's legacy and build something better. I've made my choice, she said quietly. But first I need you both to understand something. I'm not choosing between your worlds. I'm choosing the partner I believe will help me build my own. Jae-won's expression remained carefully neutral. Jae-sung's eyes blazed with barely contained intensity. Adanna stepped forward, her heart pounding. Jae-sung. I choose you. The words hung in the air. Jae-won closed his eyes briefly, pain flashing across his features before he mastered it. Jae-sung looked stunned, as if he'd expected anything but victory. I choose you, she continued, because you see me not as someone to protect or guide, but as someone with untapped potential. Because you'll challenge me to be more than I imagined I could be. And because She paused, surprised by the truth of her next words. Somewhere in the past week, I started falling for the man beneath the dangerous reputation. Jae-sung crossed the distance between them in 3 strides, cupping her face with surprising gentleness. You're sure? There's no going back from this. I'm sure. He kissed her then, fierce and claiming and filled with a promise she felt echo through her entire body. When they broke apart, she turned to Jae-won, who stood frozen by the window. I'm sorry, she said honestly. You'll find someone who chooses your world, who wants the life you're offering. It just isn't me. Jae-won nodded slowly, then did something that made her respect him even more. He crossed to his brother and offered his hand again. Take care of her. She's braver than both of us. I know, Jae-sung said, gripping his brother's hand tightly. Thank you, Hyung, for letting this happen without a fight. She made us remember who we used to be, Jae-won replied. That's worth more than winning. The wedding happened 3 weeks later, a blend of Korean and Nigerian traditions that felt like a bridge between worlds. Adanna wore a hanbok in deep purple and gold for the Korean ceremony, then changed into a traditional Igbo wrapper and blouse for the Nigerian celebration that her mother and sister attended via video call, tears streaming down their faces. But the wedding was just the beginning. True to his word, Jae-sung began teaching Adanna the intricate web of connections that kept Seoul's underground running smoothly. She had an aptitude for reading people, for understanding motivation and leverage. Within months, she'd become invaluable, not as Jae-sung's wife, but as a power broker in her own right. Her ability to navigate between cultures, to understand both legitimate business and shadow operations, made her uniquely positioned to expand the Kwon Empire into African markets properly. Jae-won proved to be more than just a gracious loser. He became Adanna's mentor in the legitimate side of the business, teaching her corporate strategy and international law. The 3 of them formed an unlikely partnership, each bringing different strengths to the integrated empire they were building. 6 months after the wedding, Adanna sat in her own office in the Kwon building, reviewing contracts for a new shipping route between Lagos and Seoul. She'd negotiated the deal herself, using connections from both sides of the empire. Her phone buzzed with a message from her mother. Your sister passed her university entrance exams. She wants to study international business, just like you. I think she wants to be like her strong older sister. Adanna smiled, remembering the terrified woman who'd arrived in Seoul believing she had no choices. That woman had learned something crucial. Sometimes the only way to freedom is through the fire, not around it. Jae-sung entered her office without knocking, carrying 2 cups of coffee. It was their afternoon ritual now. Stolen moments between meetings where they could just be Adanna and Jae-sung, not the Kwon heir and his strategist wife. What are you smiling about? He asked, settling into the chair across from her desk. Just thinking about how far I've come. 6 months ago I was your prisoner. Now I'm your partner. You were never my prisoner, he corrected gently. You were always going to be extraordinary. I just gave you the chance to prove it. She reached across the desk to take his hand. We gave each other that chance. That evening, as Seoul's lights began to sparkle against the darkening sky, Adanna stood at the window of their private apartment. Behind her, Jae-sung worked at his laptop, occasionally cursing in Korean at whatever complicated deal he was negotiating. Jae-won would arrive soon for their weekly dinner, bringing updates on the charitable foundation they'd established to help other families trapped by debt. Her phone showed photographs from Lagos, her mother in the new house they'd bought her sister in her school uniform, both of them safe and thriving. The debt that had brought her here was long paid, but Adanna had chosen to stay. Not because she had to, but because she'd found something she never expected. Purpose, power, and a love that challenged her to keep growing. Seoul had stopped feeling foreign. The weight of the Kwon name had transformed from a burden into a tool she wielded with increasing skill. She'd learned to speak Korean, to navigate both the corporate boardrooms and the shadow networks, to be equally comfortable in a hanbok or a business suit. But she never forgot where she came from. Every deal she negotiated included provisions for fair treatment of African partners. Every expansion into Lagos was done with respect for local culture and genuine partnership. She was building a bridge between worlds, proving that power didn't have to come at the cost of integrity. Jae-sung looked up from his laptop, catching her watching him. What is it? Just thinking about choices. How one decision can change everything. He closed his laptop and came to stand beside her at the window. Do you regret it? Choosing this life? Adanna leaned into him, feeling his arm wrap around her waist. Not for a second. You asked me who I wanted to become. I'm still discovering that, but I know I'm exactly where I need to be. Outside, Seoul pulsed with life and possibility. Somewhere in the city, deals were being made, empires were rising and falling, people were making choices that would define their futures. Adanna Kwon, she'd taken his name proudly, was no longer afraid of those choices. She'd learned to claim her own power, to build her own empire within the shadows and the light. The girl who'd arrived terrified from Lagos was gone. In her place stood a woman who understood that true freedom wasn't about escaping difficult choices, but about having the courage to make them on your own terms. She'd been claimed by the Seoul shadows, but she'd also brought Lagos light into their darkness, creating something entirely new. And this was just the beginning. If you enjoyed Adanna's journey from fear to power, don't forget to subscribe for more stories of women who refuse to be pawns in other people's games. Hit that notification bell because next week, we're diving into The Moscow Marriage, where a brilliant Indian tech entrepreneur discovers her arranged marriage to a Russian oligarch is actually a cover for an international espionage operation, and she has 72 hours to decide whose side she's really on. You won't want to miss it. Drop a comment below. Would you have chosen Jae-sung's dangerous world or Jae-won's stable empire? Let me know and I might feature your response in the next video. Until then, remember, sometimes the only way to claim your power is to walk straight into the fire that's meant to consume you.